The crystalline chamber of Nexus Prime gleamed under the artificial light of three distant suns, its vast circular table reflecting the prismatic forms of dozens of alien representatives. The Galactic Council had convened for what many believed would be a routine session. But the tension crackling through the recycled atmosphere suggested otherwise. 20 years had passed since humanity's admission to this august body. 2 decades of careful diplomacy and measured compliance that had earned them a modest voice among the stars. Colonel Jack Harrison sat rigidly in his designated chair, the deep blue of his Federation Navy uniform a stark contrast to the exotic materials and bioluminescent flesh surrounding him. At 45, his weathered face bore the marks of countless campaigns across human space. But today, his steel-gray eyes held a different kind of wariness. Beside him, his aide Katie Morgan shifted nervously, her auburn hair catching the light as she reviewed the data tablets before them. At 28, she represented the new generation of humanity born into galactic citizenship. Yet she had never felt more alien than in this moment. The chamber fell silent as Chancellor Zephyr rose from the central podium. The Altarian's towering form commanded attention, standing nearly 3 meters tall with skin that shifted through spectrum of colors like an oil slick. Rainbow light played across his elongated features as he activated the holographic display, projecting statistics and star charts into the air above the assembly. "Esteemed representatives," Zephyr began, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones characteristic of his species. "We gather today to address a matter of galactic stability. The human expansion has proceeded at an unprecedented rate these past 2 decades. Their colonial ambitions and population growth present challenges to the established order we have maintained for 3 millennia." Katie felt her heart sink as the implications became clear. She glanced at Colonel Harrison, whose jaw had tightened imperceptibly. They had suspected this was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud felt like a physical blow. The holographic display shifted to show human settlements scattered across dozens of star systems, pulsing red markers indicating sites of particular concern. In the interest of maintaining balance and preventing the destabilization that unchecked expansion has brought to other sectors, the Council hereby enacts Ordinance 2847. The terms materialized in the air, translated simultaneously into hundreds of languages and communication methods. Katie's breath caught as she read, "Colonial Limitation Protocol. 1 new planetary settlement every 10 years. Population caps of 50 million per world. All research and development to be subject to Council oversight and approval." The list went on, each restriction more suffocating than the last. "This is outrageous," Katie whispered, her diplomatic training warring with her instinct to stand and protest. Around the chamber, other representatives remained stoically silent, some nodding in apparent approval. Colonel Harrison placed a steadying hand on her arm, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. He had spent his career defending human interests across the galaxy, negotiating trade agreements and territorial disputes with alien powers. Now, in a single proclamation, 20 years of careful relationship building threatened to crumble. "The human delegation may present their response," Zephyr announced, the rainbow patterns on his skin pulsing with what Katie had learned to recognize as satisfaction. Colonel Harrison rose slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Chancellor, members of the Council, humanity has abided by every treaty, every regulation, every protocol established by this body. We have contributed our technology, our resources, and our blood to maintaining galactic peace. These restrictions would effectively end our civilization's growth and innovation." A ripple of harmonic sounds emerged from various representatives, the alien equivalent of murmurs. The crystalline delegate from Vega Prime resonated with what sounded like approval, while the insectoid, hive-mind representative from the Outer Rim clicked in apparent disagreement. "Your compliance has been noted," Zephyr replied, his tone suggesting the matter was already decided. However, your species' rapid expansion threatens the careful balance we have maintained. The Korvac Wars nearly destroyed this sector 3 centuries ago precisely because we failed to regulate an expanding civilization. We will not repeat that mistake. Katie stood despite her training, her chair scraping against the polished floor. With respect, Chancellor, we are not the Korvac. Humanity has never shown aggressive expansion toward inhabited systems. Our growth comes from terraforming barren worlds and establishing research colonies in empty space. We seek knowledge and betterment, not conquest. The chamber erupted in various forms of alien communication, from harmonious singing to rapid clicking and electromagnetic pulses. Zephyr raised one elongated hand for silence, the rainbow cascade on his skin now showing deeper, more ominous colors. The young human speaks with passion, but little wisdom. Every species believes itself different from those who came before. Every expanding civilization sees its own growth as benevolent, while viewing others as threatening. This is precisely why regulation is necessary. Colonel Harrison felt something crystallize in his chest, a cold certainty that had guided him through battles across the galaxy. And if humanity rejects these limitations, then humanity will face the consequences of defying galactic law, Zephyr replied, his harmonic voice carrying undertones that made Katie's skin crawl. The Council's authority derives from the combined might of 400 civilizations. I trust you understand the mathematics involved. The session continued for another 3 hours, but Katie barely heard the procedural discussions and formal protests. Her mind raced through scenarios, each more dire than the last. Humanity had built its interstellar civilization on the principles of exploration and innovation. To accept these restrictions would be to accept a slow death by suffocation. As the assembly finally adjourned, Colonel Harrison gathered his materials with careful precision. His movements betrayed nothing of the fury Katie knew must be burning inside him. They walked in silence through the gleaming corridors of Nexus Prime, past the exotic gardens and cultural exhibits that celebrated the diversity of galactic civilization. It wasn't until they reached the privacy of their diplomatic quarters that Harrison finally spoke. "Pack everything. We're leaving within the hour." "Sir?" Katie set down her data tablets, studying his face for clues. "Not just leaving the station. Katie, we're going home. And then we're implementing Option Gamma." Katie felt the blood drain from her face. Option Gamma was a theoretical contingency that Federation Command had developed, but never seriously considered using. It was the nuclear option, diplomatically speaking. "Colonel, if we withdraw from the Council talks, they'll interpret it as defiance. The consequences could be..." "The consequences of staying are worse." Harrison moved to the quantum communications array, his fingers dancing across the encryption keys. "Send a priority message to Admiral Morrison on New Terra. Authorization, Broken Table Protocol. Begin immediate implementation of Contingency 77 Alpha." Katie's hands trembled as she input the codes. Broken Table Protocol represented the complete abandonment of diplomatic solutions. 77 Alpha was even more specific and more dangerous. It meant humanity was going underground. Over the following weeks, as their diplomatic shuttle made its way back to human space, Katie learned the full scope of what Harrison had set in motion. The Broken Table Protocol wasn't just about withdrawing from negotiations. It was about making humanity invisible to the galactic community while simultaneously preparing for the worst-case scenario. The plan had been years in development, hidden within routine military exercises and scientific expeditions. 17 star systems had been secretly surveyed and prepared for colonization, each chosen for its strategic invisibility. These worlds existed in the spaces between the mapped regions of galactic civilization, near neutron stars whose radiation masked sensor readings, within nebulae that disrupted long-range communications, or in the gravitational shadows of brown dwarfs, where few species bothered to explore. Dr. Helen Wright, the Federation's chief xenoarchaeologist, met them at the new Terra spaceport with grim news. The Council has begun implementing sanctions. They've cut off trade routes to our outer colonies and are pressuring neutral species to limit contact with human merchants. How long before the economic pressure becomes critical? Harrison asked, as their ground vehicle navigated through the capital city's bustling streets. 6 months, maybe 8 if we implement strict rationing, Wright replied. She was a small, intense woman, whose soft-spoken manner belied her reputation as one of humanity's finest strategic minds. But Jack, are we really prepared to take this step? Once we begin the migration, there's no going back. We'll be declaring war on the entire galactic order. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, watching the city pass by. New Terra had been humanity's first successful terraforming project. Its gleaming towers and green spaces, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. The thought of abandoning it, of leaving behind everything they had built, felt like tearing out his own heart. We're not declaring war, Helen. We're declaring independence. There's a difference. Katie spoke up from the back seat. Is there? When the galaxy's most powerful military alliance tells you to submit or be destroyed. That's exactly why we have to do this. Harrison replied. If we submit now, humanity becomes a junior partner forever. Our children will grow up in a universe where human creativity is regulated by alien bureaucrats, where our expansion is limited by species that achieve spaceflight when our ancestors were still learning to make fire. The next 6 months transformed human space in ways that even the most optimistic projections hadn't anticipated. The exodus began quietly, disguised as routine supply runs and scientific expeditions. Military transports carrying research equipment actually held disassembled manufacturing facilities. Agricultural colonists were often highly trained engineers and scientists, carrying the technological knowledge necessary to establish advanced civilization on primitive worlds. Captain Steve Campbell commanded one of the transport fleets, his weathered freighter disguised to look like a simple merchant vessel. He had spent 15 years hauling cargo across human space, but nothing had prepared him for the responsibility he now carried. In his ship's hold, carefully packaged and secured, lay the complete manufacturing specifications for fusion reactors, quantum computers, and faster-than-light communication arrays. It feels like we're stealing fire from the gods. His first officer, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, observed as they prepared to jump to the Haven system, their designation for the primary refuge world, orbiting a red dwarf star deep in the Orion Arm. Maybe we are, Campbell replied, initiating the jump sequence. But fire was meant to be shared, not hoarded by those who happened to discover it first. The Haven system had been chosen for its perfect insignificance. The red dwarf primary star was too small and cool to support the kind of planets most galactic civilizations preferred. The system contained no rare elements worth mining, no strategic position along major trade routes, and no archaeological sites of interest to xenoarchaeologists. It was, by galactic standards, utterly worthless. That worthlessness made it perfect for humanity's purposes. The second planet, slightly larger than Earth but with a thinner atmosphere, could be terraformed within a decade. The asteroid belt contained sufficient raw materials to build an industrial base. Most importantly, the system's location in a region of space known for gravitational anomalies meant that long-range sensors would have difficulty detecting activity there. Dr. Wright supervised the establishment of the first settlements, her expertise in alien civilizations proving invaluable as they designed colonies that could remain hidden from galactic surveillance. The key is to avoid the patterns that other species look for, she explained to the growing community of engineers and scientists. Most galactic civilizations follow predictable development patterns: orbital stations around gas giants, mining operations on metallic asteroids, communication arrays on system peripheries. We need to do things differently. The human settlements that emerged over the following months would have been barely recognizable to galactic observers. Instead of massive orbital platforms, humans built underground cities, connected by tunnels bored through planetary crust. Rather than strip mining asteroids, they developed nanotechnology to extract materials at the molecular level, leaving the celestial bodies visually unchanged. Communication was handled through quantum entanglement rather than electromagnetic broadcasts, making their messages undetectable to traditional monitoring. Meanwhile, Katie had become the unofficial coordinator between the various refuge systems. Her shuttlecraft, modified with the latest stealth technology, moved constantly between the hidden colonies, carrying information, supplies, and the occasional VIP. She had grown into the role that circumstances had forced upon her, her initial nervousness replaced by quiet competence and unwavering determination. The Kepler Station colony reports full manufacturing capability, she told Harrison during one of their regular briefings. They've successfully reverse-engineered the Altarian gravity manipulation technology and improved its efficiency by 30%. Harrison nodded, making notes on his tablet. 3 years had passed since humanity's withdrawal from galactic society, and the results exceeded even his most optimistic projections. Cut off from alien technology and forced to innovate or die, human scientists had achieved breakthrough after breakthrough, without the constraints of galactic regulations and the subtle pressure to conform to established technological paradigms. Human creativity had exploded across every field of endeavor. "What about defensive capabilities?" he asked. "Better than expected. Dr. Martinez's team has weaponized the gravity manipulation technology. The prototype tests suggest we could disable most galactic vessel designs without firing a shot. Their propulsion systems can't handle the kind of gravitational distortions we can now generate." The implications were staggering. Humanity had not only survived its exile from galactic civilization, but had emerged stronger and more technologically advanced than ever before. The question now was what to do with that advancement. The answer came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Rodriguez, now commanding her own intelligence vessel, intercepted communications indicating that the Zephyrian Consortium, one of the Council's major mining operations, was preparing to exploit a newly discovered resource field in the Cygnus sector. The operation would require the displacement of 3 pre-spaceflight civilizations, their worlds stripped of valuable minerals to feed the galactic economy. "This is exactly what they prevented us from doing," Katie said during the emergency strategy session. "They claim to regulate expansion to prevent harm to developing species, but they're about to commit genocide for profit." Harrison studied the intelligence reports, his expression grim. The Zephyrian operation represented everything wrong with the galactic order. Powerful species exploiting weaker ones, while hiding behind the rhetoric of stability and regulation. Worse, it provided the perfect opportunity to announce humanity's return to galactic affairs. "We're going to stop them," he decided. "Full fleet deployment. It's time to remind the galaxy that humanity never agreed to disappear forever." The Battle of the Cygnus mining field would later be remembered as the moment humanity announced its transformation from a supplicant species to a galactic power. The Zephyrian fleet, expecting no resistance in what they considered empty space, found themselves facing an array of vessels unlike anything in their databases. Human ships had evolved during their years of exile, incorporating technologies that no galactic civilization had imagined possible. The vessels moved with impossible agility, their hulls flickering in and out of visible spectrum as stealth systems engaged and disengaged. When the Zephyrians attempted to bring their weapons to bear, they found their targeting systems confused by gravitational distortions that bent space itself around the human vessels. Captain Campbell, now commanding the flagship of the human fleet, opened communication channels with the Zephyrian commander. "This system is under human protection. Withdraw your forces immediately, or face the consequences." The Zephyrian response was predictable, a mixture of outrage, disbelief, and threats to report this incident to the Galactic Council. Campbell listened patiently, then demonstrated humanity's new capabilities by temporarily disabling the Zephyrian flagship's artificial gravity, leaving the crew floating helplessly until the message sank in. "You will leave the system within 1 standard hour," Campbell repeated. "Any attempt to return will be met with permanent consequences. This is your only warning." The Zephyrian fleet departed in disorder, their communication systems frantically broadcasting reports back to Council space. Within days, the news had spread throughout galactic civilization. Humanity had returned, transformed, and wielding technologies that challenged the established order. Chancellor Zephyr's emergency session of the Galactic Council was a study in controlled panic. The rainbow patterns on his skin shifted rapidly through colors that indicated deep agitation as he addressed the assembly. "The human defiance has exceeded all projections. Our intelligence services report that they have established at least a dozen colonies in previously unknown systems. Their technological advancement during their period of isolation appears to have been extraordinary. We must decide how to respond to this challenge to Council authority." The debate that followed revealed the deep fractures within the galactic order that humanity's exile had exposed. Species that had long chafed under Council restrictions saw humanity's success as proof that independence was possible. Others, particularly those in positions of power, demanded military action to crush the human rebellion before it inspired further defiance. The Viridian delegate, representing a species that had been forced to abandon their expansion ambitions centuries earlier, spoke with barely controlled anger. "You forced us to accept limitations that crippled our development for the sake of galactic stability. Now you discover that at least one species has found a way to circumvent those limitations and prosper. Perhaps the problem isn't with expanding civilizations. Perhaps the problem is with the limitations themselves." Similar sentiments echoed from representatives of dozens of species that had been relegated to minor roles in galactic affairs. The human example was proving contagious, inspiring questions about the fundamental assumptions underlying the Council's authority. Meanwhile, in the hidden depths of the Haven system, humanity was preparing for the next phase of their emergence. The success at Cygnus had proven their military capabilities, but Harrison knew that true victory would require more than superior technology. "We need allies," he told the assembled fleet commanders and colony leaders. "Species that share our vision of a galaxy, where growth and innovation aren't crimes punishable by economic strangulation." Katie, now holding the formal title of Director of Interspecies Relations, had spent months identifying potential partners. "The preliminary contacts are promising. The Viridians are interested in formal talks. So are the Helios Collective and several of the Rimworld Federations. They're all species that have been marginalized by the current power structure." Dr. Wright added her analysis. "The Council's authority has always depended on the assumption that resistance was futile. We've proven that assumption false. Now we need to demonstrate that cooperation with us offers more benefits than submission to them." The formation of what would later be called the Free Stars Alliance began quietly, with secret meetings in neutral territories and coded communications between species that had never before considered challenging the galactic order. Humanity's technological advantages provided the foundation, but the Alliance's true strength lay in its fundamental premise, that every species had the right to determine its own destiny. The Alliance's first joint operation targeted a Council enforcement fleet that was attempting to blockade a Helios Collective world. The planet's crime had been developing fusion technology without Council approval, a violation of regulations that required all advanced research to be conducted under galactic oversight. The human fleet arrived at the blockade coordinates to find their new allies already engaged with Council forces, Viridian ships, their crystalline hulls refracting starlight into spectacular displays. fought alongside the organic vessels of the Helios Collective against the standardized warships of the Galactic Enforcement Division. Harrison, commanding from the bridge of the newly commissioned flagship Independence, watched the battle unfold with mixture of pride and sadness. It had come to this: war between species that should have been exploring the universe together. But the Council's rigid control had made peaceful coexistence impossible. All units, this is Admiral Harrison. Target propulsion and weapon systems only. Our goal is to disable, not destroy. We're fighting for freedom, not revenge. The battle was brief, but decisive. Council forces, designed to intimidate civilian populations rather than face peer-level opposition, found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. The blockade was broken within hours, and the Helios Collective world was free to continue its research. More importantly, the galaxy had witnessed the birth of a new power block, one that offered an alternative to the Council's authoritarian model. Within weeks, delegations from dozens of species were arriving at Haven, seeking membership in the Free Stars Alliance. The final confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. Chancellor Zephyr, faced with the collapse of his authority and the defection of nearly a third of the Council's member species, made the decision that would define his legacy. Rather than negotiate with the Alliance, he chose to demonstrate the consequences of defying the established order. The Council fleet that emerged from hyperspace at the Haven system was the largest military force assembled in galactic history. 400 species had contributed vessels to what Zephyr called the Restoration Fleet, a massive armada intended to crush the human rebellion and restore galactic order. On Haven's surface, Katie stood in the operations center that had been carved from living rock deep beneath the planet's crust. The displays around her showed the incoming fleet, its size almost incomprehensible. Thousands of vessels, representing the combined military might of galactic civilization, were moving toward the system that had become the symbol of human defiance. "Admiral Harrison is requesting permission to evacuate the civilian populations," reported one of the technicians. Katie shook her head. "Tell him we stay, all of us. This is our home now, and we don't abandon our homes." The battle for Haven would last 3 days and fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy. The Council forces expected to face a desperate last stand by the human fleet. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented in galactic warfare: a fully integrated defense network that turned an entire star system into a weapon. Human engineers had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. The asteroid belt had been seeded with automated defense platforms that could appear and disappear at will, their stealth systems making them invisible until they struck. The system's outer planets mounted gravitational manipulation arrays that could create space-time distortions capable of disabling entire fleets. Most shocking of all was the revelation that humanity had weaponized their terraforming technology. Haven itself became an active participant in the battle, its artificial weather systems generating electromagnetic pulses that disabled approaching vessels, while its modified ecosystem released clouds of nanoscale machines that infiltrated enemy ships and shut down their vital systems. The Council forces found themselves fighting not just the human fleet, but the star system itself. Their advantage in numbers became meaningless when space itself seemed to be working against them. Ships that should have been invulnerable found their hulls dissolving as targeted nanomachines converted their armor into harmless gases. Vessels that had dominated battlefields across the galaxy discovered that their weapons couldn't lock onto targets that bent light around themselves like mirages. By the third day, Chancellor Zephyr was forced to acknowledge what had become obvious to everyone else. The Restoration Fleet was not restoring anything. It was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that had evolved beyond anything the galactic order could comprehend. The moment that would define the new age came when Admiral Harrison opened a communication channel to the Council flagship, his image appearing on screens throughout the battered fleet. Katie stood beside him, her presence symbolic of humanity's transformation from nervous supplicants to confident equals. Chancellor Zephyr, members of the Galactic Council, you came here to restore the old order. Instead, you have witnessed the birth of the new one. Humanity offers you a choice. Join us in building a galaxy where every species can reach its full potential, or continue to cling to a system that serves only those who fear change. Harrison gestured to the displays showing the battle's aftermath. Your fleet is disabled but not destroyed. Your crews are alive and will be returned safely to Council space. This is not conquest, Chancellor. This is liberation. The Free Stars Alliance extends an offer of membership to every species in your fleet, including your own. The silence that followed stretched for several minutes before Zephyr's reply came, his harmonic voice lacking its usual authority. What you offer, it is not order, it is chaos. No, Katie replied, her voice carrying clearly across the communication channel. What we offer is choice. The chaos you fear is simply the sound of civilizations refusing to be silenced. The aftermath of the Battle of Haven transformed galactic civilization in ways that would take generations to fully understand. The Galactic Council didn't collapse immediately, but its authority was forever diminished. Nearly half of its member species either joined the Free Stars Alliance or declared neutrality, choosing to chart their own courses among the stars. The alliance itself grew rapidly, but not through conquest or coercion. Instead, it attracted species through the simple demonstration that alternatives to the old order were possible. Technological exchange between alliance members accelerated innovation beyond anything the galaxy had previously seen. Worlds that had been stagnant for centuries suddenly bloomed with new discoveries and artistic achievements. Katie, now serving as the Alliance's first Secretary General, often reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The nervous young aide who had once sat in the council chambers listening to humanity's death sentence had become one of the most influential figures in galactic politics. Yet, the transformation felt natural, the inevitable result of refusing to accept limitations imposed by others. Standing on the observation deck of Haven Station, she watched ships from dozens of species come and go, each carrying goods, knowledge, and dreams that would have been impossible under the old system. The galaxy was louder now, more chaotic, sometimes more dangerous. It was also more alive than it had been in millennia. Admiral Harrison joined her at the viewing port, his hair now silver, but his eyes still holding the determination that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. "Any regrets?" he asked, watching a Viridian crystal ship dock with an organic Helios vessel, their crews preparing for a joint expedition to explore the galaxy's edge. Katie smiled, thinking of all the species that now had the freedom to grow, to explore, to become more than they had ever imagined possible. Only that it took us so long to abandon that table. Behind them, the galaxy turned on its ancient axis, but the light of its stars seemed brighter somehow, illuminated by the dreams of civilizations that had finally learned they could reach for anything they could imagine. The old order had promised stability through restriction. The new order offered something far more precious, the infinite possibility that came with freedom. In the years that followed, historians would debate whether humanity's exodus from the Galactic Council represented rebellion or evolution. Katie preferred to think of it as both. Sometimes, she reflected, the greatest act of creation required first having the courage to walk away from the table where others were trying to decide your fate. The galaxy watched, and in watching, learned that the greatest growth often came not from following established paths, but from having the courage to forge new ones among the stars.